Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name's DW, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. So let's get into the content a little bit to kick things off. We have an agenda here about what we'll be exploring, but I think it may be easiest to just jump right in. So if you don't know what Payble is, we're Australia and New Zealand's first payment experience platform. And often I think, well, what does that mean exactly? And if you think about the old days where people would need to receive a rates notice, jump online or phone to pay, with a payment experience platform, you can architect the journey for your ratepayers all the way from start to finish in a way that's easiest for them and easiest for you in council. And not only are we doing rates now, we're also doing digital notices, we're doing fines and infringements, and we're also doing animals and pets. So things have expanded a little bit more over here. And I'm hoping by the end of the year, we can have even more great logos on this map. Despite the technology and how it's developed, it's interesting that some of the processes haven't really changed. So despite having this arsenal of different ways to communicate with our citizens, we haven't really developed as much as we could have by now. And let's jump into this a little bit more. So if you think about your council experience, do you have no forms at all in the process, either digital or paper? Are people able to frictionlessly pay, i.e., can they do so in 2 to 3 taps? Can they set their own payment schedule? Can they get reminders and alerts dynamically in the palm of their hand? And can they set and forget things? So these are all the expectations, but I'm not sure how many of us on here would be able to say that we can deliver all of these things now. So let's have a think about SMS and the capabilities of it for us here at Council. And I think the main thing that SMS can disrupt is direct mail. And I think it's interesting when we look at the data, 61% of us actually prefer these SMS alerts versus any other form of communication. So if we look at why it's effective or why we should consider it, think of the alternative, right? So we discussed letter and that was impossible if we were to buy Uber Eats. Now we think about email, and often with the email channel, it's just been so oversaturated that the majority of messages are either going into spam or they're unopened by the consumer. You might receive on average between 20 and 30 marketing related messages via email each day. Whereas on SMS, you're unlikely to receive a single message other than those from family and friends. So as a result, 20% of people on average open the emails. That's rather generous. We see at Payble more towards 16.5%. And only 2% of the links in emails are clicked when you know the sender. So that's a lot different compared to an SMS, which is almost 4 times higher at 82%. And where the links are clicked a fifth of the time, right? So you can't really say that those two channels are comparable. If we dive into a little bit about SMS in local government, now what we feel is that by introducing SMS, there can be some disruption. The reason being is that there are some individuals who will call or write letters and complain about the SMS that they've received. What's interesting is in the hidden majority. So what I mean by that is if 95 to 98% of the population benefited from the SMS, you won't hear from them at all. Why? Because they take an action. So what is important is if you're able to use a feedback tool, you can actually use that tool to rate whether or not the SMSs are helpful and to use that data to further gain traction inside your council to expand your SMS program. So if we look at this message, if we are doing SMS at all, I think that's a positive step. But I'd say 9 in 10 cases that I see are a generic message that is word only, or copy only, I should say, and it does not have any link. What we're trying to advocate are these four things. Proactive. So what does that mean? It means messaging someone before there is a problem. Second is automatic. So if you think about the manual heavy lifting you have to do before each campaign, that should disappear. Zoran also said he does 8 SMS reminders that are generic in nature, done in bulk. So if these were automatic, that would solve a lot of work, for instance. Self-solving. So what does that mean? It means if I have a problem, I can fix it. The fourth one is a clear CTA. What does CTA mean? That means call to action, right? So your SMS has one clear purpose behind it. So what we want to do is think about advanced SMS types and things that we can do to automate things. So one thing would be obviously our scheduled payment reminders. Another one is if we want to rebalance our plans and if we change a plan that's already in existence. These three, though, are a little bit more, I'd say, on the maturity curve and are really, really powerful. This one on the left here, cart abandonment, with rates and other forms of payment at council, it's not as big as a kitchen, but it's probably more important because I'd say that if you're not able to make those payments, the consequences can be severe if left long enough. So it's really important to experiment with this. And we've seen that almost 15% of people come back within 24 hours of receiving a reminder. So they've gone to pay, almost finished, and then we can bring them back. Another one is proactive repairs. So what would be interesting for us to think about here, there's some magic here where if there is a missed payment, sending out a message automatically for that individual to rectify it can resolve almost 100% of these payment failures. The final one is the old pesky card expiry, and this happened to me the other day, but 83% of people can update their details from this kind of SMS flow. So these are some really good examples of some advanced workflows that you should be thinking about right now. Now, let's talk about a little bit of the consent and privacy. And it's really difficult to ensure compliance with the Spam Act if you're a private business. However, if you're a council, the rules are a lot more flexible. And so I often hear this point of contention with council leaders about, well, the customer gave us their mobile number for one service, but we're not sure if they've given it for all the services. And there's legislation that actually covers you where if you have the contact details of an individual and the information that you're sending is for informative purposes, i.e., it's not instructing someone to pay, i.e., you need to pay $100 by. Instead, it's saying reminding or are you aware of? That change in language covers you to be able to send a whole array of SMS messages you probably would be a little bit reluctant or risk adverse to send today. Now, what we need to think about in building our trust with the community is making sure our messages are engaging. So if we do ask them to do something, that they can do it seamlessly. Establishing authenticity is important. So what does that mean? Let's have a look at the results. So we had a few people being perhaps a little bit shy with their sharing, but we had a couple of people saying we do 2 or more bulk SMS per year. I'd love to see more people voting there so we could ask you and engage you a little bit more. However, if we assume that most of us are doing somewhere between 1 and 4 campaigns, that's still not that frequent. And it means that our authenticity level is low, i.e., if we're messaging people regularly with relevant information that's well timed, they trust that number, that sender ID it's called, that number from council as the only number that they should be speaking to. However, if your message is once in a blue moon, that's where people question the authenticity even more. There's also a couple of other things. So we want to reduce the risk of people feeling like they've been scammed, respect that privacy. So if people don't want to receive it, the opt out is really easy. Most councils, that's impossible, because if we skip back a few slides here, that's the generic message that people are sending. There's nothing about opt out in that kind of a message. And I think it's important to also address concerns from targeted groups as well. So let's have a look at an example of a SMS that goes out and analyze it a little bit and have a look at a few different things we can talk about. So up the top, there's no alphanumeric sender ID. That's something that is very hard to get, right? You have to go through certain legal approvals to get that. So obviously, when educating your community, that's important. When it is sent to a lot of people and people indicate whether it's spam or not, Google, Apple, and other now phone providers aggregate that information to help other users. Then we also see no personalization in that message. So it just says your income return, right? It's asking for more info without sharing it, right? So it should tell you more about you and why before it's asking you to do anything. And I think it's also slightly urgent and aggressive. So the use of immediately, right, kind of is language that we don't normally want to use if our message is from a trusted source. So let's have a look now about a different example and where we're seeing the results, right? So again, we register your sender ID via ACMA. So basically, instead of this example here where it comes up with a number, you can actually have your city name or council name up the top. Similarly, we've got that first and last name personalization, and we're including the address of the property and the rates notice number. So all of that makes everything really specific. Again, we'd like to give context as to why we're contacting someone. And we also create clear communication instructions about what will happen next if they do nothing. And then you notice that the link actually has the council URL in it, which is essential to get approved when sending the message, but also creates greater trust and comfort. And then if you have any questions, you can reach out to us on that number. What I think we want to do here is number 6 is let's keep testing and optimizing. And I spoke about this already, but I think the timing and frequency is important. So what we actually do now with some of our councils is instead of sending all of the SMS at a certain time, we now have technology that supports something called call center smoothing. So what that does is allows us to pick a time interval where there are people operating during the day and spread those messages out over those time intervals. So what I'd like to do to kind of wrap this up is to talk about City of Dandenong and a few different SMS types just for a bit of a case study. Let's have a look at where we are here. And when rates are due, we'd probably say that's more of a basic kind of communication. So now we're going to explore some of these more sophisticated ones that I discussed earlier. So something I hear so much pain about is change of ownership notifications. Now, when we do the scheduled payment reminders, you can see on the left that those messages are a little bit shorter. However, if there's a rebalance or a change, that message is a little bit longer. And so these messages are in play as we speak. Another example is when rates are issued, and we're heading into that period now. So that's why I thought this message is really, really important to showcase. So it shows the new rates calculation and also shows that review in the platform, which I think is really sophisticated. And then with proactive repairs, this is another example at Dandenong too, when there is an event that has led to something failing and what the customer can do to fix it. Finally, this is really a fun one. It has a person's name attached. So this is Adam, and you went to pay but didn't. So to pay now, you can click here. And I like that. If you've already paid your rates, there's no need to do anything. Just disregard this message. And again, the card details updating message here is like so. This is an example of a council who in a series of months went from step one, where there was only a generic rates alert, to all of these extra steps, which are now yielding results